Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at this interesting little product that I recently picked up on Amazon for around $55. This is known as the Game Stick Lite, and I'm guessing they also offer a Pro model, but I haven't seen it for sale. And basically what we have here is a plug-and-play emulation console that comes with two wireless controllers, and they claim there's 3,555 games on this thing. If you take a look at the Amazon listing, they state that this does support Dreamcast, PSP, and 64, but unfortunately on the box itself, it says nothing about those consoles, and there's no games preloaded for any of those mentioned consoles. What we have here is some MAME, SNES, Sega Genesis, PlayStation 1, Game Boy, Game Boy Advanced, and Atari. And I'm sure that listing will get a lot of people interested in this, but unfortunately it's just not going to support those higher end systems. This comes in at around $55 on Amazon. And inside of the box, we get the Game Stick itself, which is basically a little HDMI dongle. Over here, we have one USB port, micro USB, and an SD card slot. We also get two inexpensive 2.4 gigahertz wireless controllers. These are like PS3 clone controllers. I've used these in the past on other systems, and they're really not that bad. If you're looking for something super cheap for around $15 for both of these controllers, and you need something for, let's say, your Raspberry Pi running RetroPie, and you don't want to break the bank, these do work out really well, but just note they're not high-end controllers. They'll get you by in a pinch, and they do run on two AAA batteries. Under here, I believe we have some more stuff like the user manual. One side is in English, one side is in Chinese. We also have a micro USB cable for powering the stick itself. You just need 5 volts, 1 amp for this thing. We also have an HDMI extension and our micro SD card, which has all of our games. This is a 32 gigabyte card. And like I mentioned, they claim there's 3,555 games. So as you can see, on one side we just have that full-size HDMI out. We have a micro SD card slot over here on this side. And on the very end, a single USB 2.0 port and micro USB. There's not much information online about this, so I'm not exactly sure about the internal specs, but on the box itself it says we have 256 megabytes of RAM, and the CPU is a GB2, which I've actually seen before in cheaper handhelds that you can pick up on eBay and Amazon. So it's not going to be a high-end machine by any means. Let's go ahead and get this thing started up. I got that micro SD card inserted and the dongle for the controllers. Go ahead and plug this power in, and I'm just powering from one of the USB ports on the monitor I'm using here. Put some batteries in this. It looks like it automatically detected it. This actually booted up way quicker than I thought it would. But yeah, I've definitely seen this kind of interface in the cheaper handhelds that you can pick up on eBay and Amazon. It does say 4K, but this is outputting in 720p. I'm pretty sure of it. Might be 1080, but I'm leaning towards 720. There's not much here in the settings. We can change the language. We can change the keytone setting. We can completely remove it if we want to. We can reset the unit, and that's about it. There's no performance settings in here whatsoever. Let's see how many games are on here. Not quite 3,555, but it's close enough. I'm going to give them that. We can choose from MAME, Famicom, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Mega Drive, Super Famicom, PS1, and Atari. There's no N64, PSP, or Dreamcast whatsoever on this device. We also have a history section, so if you play a game and you want to go back to it, it's going to be listed here. We can also search, and I want to see how this works because sometimes it's just here and it doesn't work, but typing this in, looks like it found all the Sonic games on the console. So they have tried to make it a little easier to navigate this whole interface. But, you know, what I'm really worried about is performance. So let's go ahead and get right into it. We'll go with King of Fighters 99. Get a little bit of a loading screen. And, yeah, hopefully this does load. In the past, on these lower-end systems, I have noticed that it does take a lot longer to load arcade games, specifically Neo Geo and MAME. But I'm really hoping this isn't stuck here. Okay, there we go. I was getting a little worried there, but yeah, it looks like it takes a while to load these arcade games up. Before we jump right into some gameplay, I did want to mention that with each of these emulators, or any game you're running, just press start and select and it'll bring you to the main menu. We can resume, restart, save slot. I'm not sure how many they have here, but looks like we definitely have more than 10. Save state, load state. You can also map the controls differently or turn on your analog stick if you want to. So there are a couple settings here, but nothing to do with performance. It doesn't look like they're using much smoothing, if any at all. We still see that pixelation, which is something I love. Some of these consoles come preset with the smoothing on, and you just can't turn it off, and it does look horrible with these older games. I really do want to see those pixels. But it looks like we're getting decent performance here out of Neo Geo. I know that there will be some arcade games that are harder to run than this, but for the most part, I think they've kind of gone through and pick and chose what they were going to put on this SD card, so we should get decent performance out of all of the arcade stuff that's on here. Let's test one more. Here's Marvel Superheroes, and performance is pretty decent. Now there's no way to go in and change this to 4x3. We're going to be stuck at 16:9 with basically all of these games, so if you don't like stretched out games, I would definitely stay away from something like this, but that's just how it is. I also wanted to go through and test some NES. This is one of my favorite games, and I can tell you right now that this is running a little faster than it would natively on an original console, but it's not as bad as I've seen on cheaper handheld consoles. This is something you could get used to. Moving over to Sega Genesis, otherwise known as Mega Drive in other parts of the world, Gunstar Heroes, absolutely amazing game. And when it comes to Mega Drive and Genesis emulation, it doesn't take much to do it, and this is doing it just fine. Now, one system that these lower-end chips kind of struggle with is Game Boy Advance, believe it or not. They are using a lot of frame skip here to get it to run at full speed, and once you do get up to faster speeds on screen with a game like this, you will notice it lagging out. So it's really not running this at full speed because we do have that frame skip going. And once I get moving really fast, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You can kind of see it skipping over frames, so it's not doing too well with Game Boy Advance. And moving over to the highest end system that this supports, which is PlayStation 1, I'll tell you again, just like with Game Boy Advance, they are using a lot of frame skip here. With these easier to run games like Crash Bandicoot, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, but when we move over to something that's a little harder to run like Tekken 3, you really notice it. And even with the frame skip on, the game is not running at full speed. We've got some crackling going on with that sound, and overall it's just not a great experience.
Round 2, fight.
So it's really unfortunate that we were getting bad performance with GBA and PS1, because taking a look at the internals of this thing, it's actually not as low end as I thought it would be. Now, as ARM chips go in 2021, the Rock chip 3128 is still considered a low end chip, but for emulation, it should be able to push Game Boy Advance and PS1 at full speed with no issues. Really, what it comes down to is unoptimized emulators for this little chipset here, because the Rock chip 3128 is an ARM Cortex-A7 quad-core CPU running at 1.3 GHz with a Mali MP400 GPU, and with this unit here, they were correct with 256 megabytes of RAM. And yeah, in 2021, it's still considered low end, but for the emulators that this thing supports, we should be seeing some better performance, and with custom firmware, it could definitely get there. We could run GBA and PS1 with no frame skip on this thing at full speed if the emulators were optimized correctly, but I wouldn't hold my breath on updates for this thing, because a lot of companies just source these out. They'll make, let's say, 2,000 of them, sell out, and never worry about updating down the road. It's really up to the community, and I can't see this thing taking off with all of the other stuff we have in the market right now. So when it comes down to it, if you came across these on Amazon and you were thinking about picking one up, I would kind of skip it for now. Was really hoping for some decent performance out of this, and with what they had listed in the Amazon listing, was really hoping that we would see at least some N64 emulation on this thing, but we're kind of stuck with what we got right now with no custom firmware. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and even after this video, if you still want to pick one of these up, I will leave some links in the description. But that's it for this one, and like always, thanks for watching.